a good-sized object. This is several hundred feet in diameter that came up next to the lander, flew along beside them for a time. The guys in the Apollo crafts put their camera to the window and snapped the thing, and I've always jokingly said there were guys inside of this taking pictures of an asset. We were photographing them, they were photographing us. Next picture, please. Photo NASA Apollo Systems number 14, Apollo 14. Roll 70, negative, what is it, 9837, I think, or 8837. This is the Landsberg crater on the moon. The guys in orbit above the moon were particularly fascinated by Landsberg. They had been given a special assignment to take pictures of Landsberg because the crater, which they designated as Landsberg, had things going on in the crater that were very anomalous. There was construction going on. There were enormous facilities in the middle of the crater up there. So they were specifically designated and assigned to photograph Landsberg to see if they could figure out what the hell's going on down there in the crater on Landsberg. While they were looking at Landsberg, this object happened to express interest in them and flew by. Now this line is an artificial line that was drawn to show you the direction that this object was going. This is a good-sized object flying past the Apollo lander. God, I'm so glad that some of these were saved. I still get angry. 40 rolls of film for Christ's sake, and they erased them. Anyhow, next picture, please. It's the same photo of Landsberg, but with the next negative, 9838 of this object here, flying by. Next picture. Now we're getting into some nitty-gritty. I'm going to give you just a brief little bit of history here. Back in the early days of NASA and the Apollo program, I got this picture from the Japanese Space Agency, the Japanese NASA. They have a tremendous program going over there in Japan. You know, the Japanese are bright people. So the Japanese Space Agency had signed a contract with NASA years and years ago to buy copies of every picture NASA took during the Apollo program. And I'm sure the Japanese paid a sizable amount of money for this contract. And as the films was developed and the photos were made, and they shipped them off to Japan, and the Japanese have a tremendous reservoir of good, original NASA pictures. They bought them, they paid for them. Now this photograph was released by the Japanese Space Agency, and you can see the Japanese writing here. This was taken by Apollo 13. Now you're all familiar, I'm sure, with Apollo 13. That was the aborted mission that was going to the moon to land, and they had an accident on the way. They couldn't land. They damn well barely got back. While they are on their way to the moon, here's the moon, a number of things began happening. Some strange objects were appearing outside the windows of the spacecraft. And guys, they grabbed their Hasselblad camera and started taking pictures. This photograph shows 3 different objects here. This looks like a circular object with an enlarged dome on top. This is a smaller object, a circular kind of disc-shaped craft. But coming in from the right margin of this particular picture is this. Next picture, please. Here we are. This is a blow-up of the positive in the photograph. And here is a blow-up of the negative of this object here. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular object is 5 miles long. And I'm tempted to use the term Big Mother. No pun intended, but it appears to be a mothership. It's gigantic. 5 miles long. And here these NASA guys are up there in this little cramped Apollo capsule, and they look out their window and they see something that's 5 miles long. It shakes them up a little bit. When they got back to NASA with these pictures, it shook them up a hell of a lot. Next picture, please. This is the next sequence. Here, this large mother has moved into the middle of the frame, and something else has shown up over here, which has been estimated to be 2 miles long. But this really upset the guys. I've never been able to find out which one of the 3 Apollo members of the Apollo 13 crew would admit to ever having taken these pictures. Because as you know, the Apollo astronauts were threatened with their lives. I kid you not, they were threatened seriously. They even threatened their families if they ever divulged any of the information that they knew. Next photo, please. Yeah, here we are. Here's the Big Mother. Here's the other one, 2 miles long. Here's a picture of the positive. This is the negative. This mother is 5 miles long. Up here you see what appears to be 2 circular objects either arriving or departing from that particular big ship. I can almost understand why the authorities in NASA, why the authorities in the space program didn't want this information to come out. They were frightened. They were stunned. They couldn't deal with it themselves, and they figured that if they couldn't handle it, you couldn't handle it. There would be social disruption, I believe is one of the terms they used. They would disturb the body politic, I believe the term they used. So they clamped the lid down on this, and it's still down. And it's going to stay down, I'm afraid, for some time yet. Until people like yourselves and people like me and the rest of them here on the stage, by pushing and prodding and chipping away at this lie and this secrecy, eventually we will succeed. And don't you doubt that for a minute. Now I'm in for another photograph that I think will shock you some. In 1980, NASA, never a straight answer, launched the Voyager program to Saturn. They launched this little mechanical spaceship filled with cameras and film and so on. Wanted to go to Saturn because something had been going on in the rings of Saturn, around the moons of Saturn, that didn't make a lot of sense. Some anomalous events were taking place in Saturn, near Saturn, at Saturn. So they launched the Voyager in 1980. The pictures they got back from Voyager was so stunning and so shocking that they just locked them up in the safe. Fortunately, I met and developed a friendship with a retired NASA scientist by the name of Norman Bergman. Norman Bergman worked for NASA for about 30 years. He was a technician, a scientist on the Voyager program to Saturn in 1980. Norman decided, after waiting a number of years, for NASA and the authorities to be candid and honest and forthright and tell us what they really found up at Saturn. And Norman got so frustrated he wrote a book. Now, he couldn't get it published in the United States. No American publishing house would even touch it. Norman Bergman had to go to Scotland, for God's sake, to Aberdeen to get his book published. And he had published it did. He did succeed. He got his book. It's a piece of genius. It's a beautiful piece of work. And the things that they photographed near Saturn appeared in print for the first time. This is the A ring of Saturn. I think you're all familiar with what Saturn looks like. It's a beautiful planet. It's giant. It's a big one. But it's got rings all around. Well, this is the A ring, and here is an object that is self-luminous, obviously artificial, larger than our moon, that seems to be moving all around throughout the rings of Saturn among the moons of Saturn. And Saturn's got a couple of dozen moons. This object here, as I said, larger than our moon, moving all around, apparently under intelligent control in the rings of Saturn. Now, try for a moment, if you can, to imagine a kind of a technology that is capable of constructing something larger than our moon, that's artificial, that moves around wherever it wishes to go, that's probably got several thousand guys inside. That is shocking to some people. Next picture, please. This is the piece de resistance, I guess, as the French say. Here you have another self-luminous, artificially constructed object, circular in shape, larger than our moon, that is also moving here, there, and everywhere throughout the rings of Saturn and among the moons of Saturn. You know, there's got to be intelligence at work. But this is the one that really blew the NASA people on the Voyager program out of the water. This object, this is an object, guys, is 2,000 miles long. It's 400 miles in diameter. And it's an artificially constructed, Norman calls them an electromagnetic vehicle. He says they appear to be making the rings. This is one of the rings of Saturn. I think this is the B ring. Bertrand says he thought they were probably making the rings. I said, Norman, you ever consider the possibility they may be mining the rings? Because I think the rings are probably rich in nutrients, minerals probably. And an incredibly advanced civilization, I think, would work out some system of mining those rings for all the minerals that are up there and utilizing them. Because space is filled with wealth, energies of all kinds. They never have to dig another hole in the ground like we do down here. Space is filled with energy. This is 2,000 miles long, and here on this end there seems to be something like an exhaust or a flare of energy of some kind. It's probably a result of engines of some type inside this thing. But whatever it's doing, it's there, and it's a recognition and a representation of an advanced intelligence. And that's one of the things they don't want you to know, that we are confronting and relating with an intelligence that's so far beyond our own. We're looking at and talking about what's known as a Type 2 civilization. Now, for your own interest, I suspect most of you suspect this, but you are all members of a 0-0 type civilization. Beyond us, hopefully in a century or two, we might become a Type 1. But this is a representation of a Type 2 civilization. And Michio Kaku, the famous Japanese-American physicist in New York, has put out this concept about Type 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the kind of advanced cultures and civilizations we will probably meet out there. Well, in probably meet out there, we've already met them. They're here. They're in our midst. So, I think I brought about 15 or 20 of these pictures, but I simply had no time. I don't have the time to show them all. But I've shown a few here, and I think I've piqued your curiosity. And I think most of you are pretty bright people, and you know you've been conned. You know you've been lied to. You're not fools. And I think you know who you are and why you're here and where you're going. Next photograph, please. This is a photograph taken by our Mariner space vehicle that we launched back a number of years ago. This is a picture of a facility on the surface of Mars. Now, this facility is located on the equator, and it's on the surface. And those of us who studied it, and we discuss it with each other, we call it the airport. And I said, this is the parking lot. This is the administration building here. This is the main terminal here. And I imagine it's a pretty busy facility, you know, ships coming and going. But it's not an airport, it's very likely a spaceport. It is on the surface and it's on the equator of Mars. And if you're ever interested in launching a vehicle from a planet, you put it on the equator and you take advantage of the rotation of the planet to assist in the launching of your vehicle. You can take the momentum of the movement of the planet and it helps you get the thing off the ground. So it's exactly on the equator, it's on the surface, and it's massive in size. So maybe that is a parking lot, I don't know. Maybe that's the admin building, but there's something going on Mars. And I've been going back and forth with Richard Hoagland now for years, where Richard, who I know most of you are aware of, is convinced that Mars is covered with ruins. Well, it is. But it's not just ruins. There are things going on that planet. On the surface, under the surface, continuously. Next picture, please. This was published in a German magazine, but this is a Soviet photo. This is from their Phobos 2 spacecraft. This is a city under the surface of Mars that is the size of Chicago. Chicago is one of our biggest cities. Several million people live in Chicago. This is under the surface. You can see the city block. Breakdown here, portions of the neighborhoods, whatever it is. But it's generating an enormous amount of heat. And they picked this up on the infrared when Phobos is going around the planet and snapping pictures like crazy. And the Soviets were pretty open about releasing some of their photos, contrary to the United States, where lying has become a fine art. Don't get me started on my politicians. Phobos 2, city on Mars, under the surface. You can see the streets, Broadway, First Avenue, whatever, you know. People have said, well, who is there? And I says, for God's sake, it's the Martians who are there. What a silly question to ask. Who's there? Next photograph. Now, I love this picture. I'm in love with this lady. Your ancestors and mine called her Gaia. She was feminine. She was a goddess. She was sacred. This beautiful lady has a respiratory system. She has a circulatory system. And she has a heart. And she's our source of life on this planet. We needed her. We need her now. We wouldn't be here if it were not for her. You talk about Holy Lands, Mecca, Jerusalem, here, there, everywhere. That is the Holy Land, people. That beloved planet that we are home. Next picture, please. I spoke to you earlier about the fact that your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and so on, the generations yet to come, have a destiny in the stars. And in time, they will go out there and claim their rightful place in that infinite community of life. And you can believe that, and you can accept that with an assurance and a truth that goes beyond doubt. The destiny of this species and this race, this troublesome clan of monkeys, is in the stars. And there is your destiny. And I want you to understand that and have some hope. And don't get depressed. Because you're going to be undergoing some very difficult times in a few years yet ahead. We're going through this transition, this transformation, this transcendent transformation into another species, into another race. And if you remember your own adolescence, it was a painful time. The species, the race, is going through adolescence. But we're not alone. We're being helped. We have family out there that's helping us. And they've been helping us for a long time. They've been trying to encourage us and nourish us and try to point the right direction for us to go. Because we are troublesome adolescent children. And we are going through that transformation. But my point is that there is no doubt about the inevitable destiny and truth of the human race. Now I want to quote something from you, if you'll bear with me here. One of my favorite authors, poets, was a man I've admired for years. Count Leo Tolstoy. Tolstoy said that there is something in the human spirit that will survive and will prevail. That will survive and prevail, and that there is a tiny and brilliant light burning brightly in the heart of man that will not go out no matter how dark the world becomes. And then in the years ahead, when things are difficult, the economic problems take place, there will still be disruptions, fear, hope. Sadly enough, I'm afraid there will still be blood in the streets, here, there, and everywhere. This coming out of adolescence is not an easy process. But then, what do you do when you reach beyond adolescence? You reach adulthood. You grow up. And we're growing up. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my journey is coming to an end. But for many of you out there, your journey has just begun. And I want to say something to you before I leave the stage this afternoon. No matter how dark the world becomes, be sure, as Tolstoy said, there is a spark, there is a flame burning in your heart that will never go out, no matter how dark the world becomes. And as my journey is coming to a close, and some of you, your journey is just beginning, I wanted to say to you, in a term that I think is absolutely appropriate, you Spaniards have got some beautiful terms and words. Vaya con Dios.